In the 1940s to 43, the new Soviet Kazakh Republic was struck by famine. The catastrophe, which was a result of the just Stalin radical policy of the state, transformed caused profound social, demographic, and environmental changes in the Soviet Kazakhstan. The consequences of the disaster are also felt in independent Kazakhstan today. The scale of the tragedy so great for the famine in the 1332 went down in history as the earth with a great Jew.
Где-то трагедия 30-х годов в Казахстане, она вошла в пятитомную историю Республики Казахстан, в частности, 4-й том. Причины голода 30-х годов, если сказать, это относится к сфере политической и экономической деятельности руководителей советского государства.
A group of figures for Republic wrote in Galashukin personally about the cause of the catastrophe on June 1942 in the regional community of the CPSU, Musreber, Gatulin, David Khalif, Altenbekov, Kwanashev, leader of five. Later to Moscow and government against were writing representatives of the Kazakh elite and ordinary people. Most of the obvious supporters of this view have become victims of persecution, so they call it later of five permanent Kazakh cultural figures occurs as a special place in the history of Kazakhstan. The later noted about the violation of the Leninist principle of voluntariness, not taking account of the future of the village, about the liquidness of the middle president with the base. They also accused Galashukin of designing as a general line of the party on collectivization, destroying, and the ancients of the paper to develop animal hungry, which is a rise to evasion of the castle breeding.
В Казахстане имело место 372 таких крупных восстаний. Первое восстание это случилось в 1929 году, 27 сентября, в Батпакаринском районе Кустанайской области. Это родина Амангельда Иманова. Представители, участники этого восстания, в основном это соратники Амангельда Иманова, Сардары, участники восстания 16 года. Их поддержали другие, там уже более молодые люди. Они заняли, скажем, районный центр Батпаккара, свергли районную власть во главе с первым секретарем райкома и председателем исполкома, избрали свой народный совет, и в течение недели они правили сами. Возвращали людям отобранный скот, зерно, которое по государственным заготовкам, там, скажем, там собирали у людей. Ну и через неделю пришли вооруженные отряды войск ОГПУ, НКВД, чекистские отряды другие, и восстание было подавлено. И люди привлечено, огромное число людей было привлечено к ответственности.
Kazakh famine of the 1930s to 33s was part of the famine of collectivization in Soviet Union. In 1929, under the leadership of Stalin, Moscow launched the first 5-year planning program for the transformation of society, industry, and agriculture. These regions that traditionally supplied food products suffered the most. Nomadic Kazakhs suffered especially hard from the Great Famine of the 1930s to 1933. To feed themselves, nomads began to slaughter their cattle and flee the republic. In some regions of the republic, activists have launched a program settling under the basis of continuous collectivization. More than 1.1 million people fled Soviet Kazakhstan from 1931 to 1933, the peak of the Kazakh famine. Stalin and Philip Goloshukin, the first secretary of the Party of Kazakhstan, corresponded regularly throughout the famine period during this crisis, and Stalin was aware of the extent of the damage inflicted on the Kazakhs. On September 17, 1932, after the Republic had endured almost 3 years of agony, the Central Committee made some concessions, including allowing private ownership of cattle to nomads, and began supplying food aid. During the Kazakh famine, about 90% of the livestock of the Republic died, dealing a crushing blow to the pastoral nomadic society. Most Kazakhs were forced to start a sedentary lifestyle, which for them means a sharp reorientation of identity. The concepts of being Kazakh and being a nomad were closely intertwined.
Between 1931 and 33, the peak of the Kazakh famine, more than 1.1 million people left the republic, the vast majority of them Kazakhs. They fled to neighboring Soviet republics as well as abroad, to the Chinese province of Xinjiang, which bordered Soviet Kazakhstan in the east. Many of these refugees never return to Kazakhstan. They will settle in China or in neighboring Soviet republics. Of the 1.5 million victims of the tragedy, about 1.3 million were Kazakhs. People were so exhausted from hunger that cannibalism developed in the country. Cases of cannibalism were recorded when refugees killed comrades in misfortune and sometimes even ate raw meat. Some tried to trade in their own children's meat for bread. By 1933, out of 40 million heads of cattle, about 1/10 remained. Kazakhs were the first to suffer from such actions since cattle was the main, and often the only source to their livelihood. As a result, during the years of famine died from 1 million people up to 2 million people. 48% of the indigenous population died and left the SSSR. Part of the Kazakhs were forced to migrate to Kyrgyzstan, China, Mongolia, Iran, and Afghanistan. The first event in Kazakhstan was the confiscation carried out in the spring of 1920 and the autumn of 1928. 11,260 farms were under confiscation, from which about 4,500 head of livestock were taken away.